The Sun's defence editor, Jerome Starkey, has a target on his back after a Russian court placed him on an international interstate wanted list, a wanted man.
Yeah, he's a distinguished war correspondent who's reported here on Good Morning Britain and has kept all of our viewers across the UK informed about the latest developments on the war in Ukraine since the invasion in February 2022. But in August last year, he travelled into the Russian territory of Kursk. And it is there that a regional court has accused him of illegally crossing the border. Well, Jerome, are you nervous?
Good morning, Susanna. Well, we're taking it seriously, but no, I'm not nervous. It's really clear a Russian court putting me on a wanted list is an act of political theatre. It's an attempt to scare me, and it's an attempt to intimidate journalists like me who might cover the war in Ukraine. And ultimately, by covering the war in Ukraine, we are bringing to the attention of your viewers and our readers the atrocities that are being committed, a totally unnecessary conflict that Vladimir Putin has started.
But President Putin doesn't mess about. And we know that, you know, there are things that can happen here.
There are things that can happen here. And, of course, we know only too well that opponents of the Kremlin have been poisoned, have been murdered, not just here, but around the world.
If he's... I mean, as you say, if the worst that he's guilty of is political theatre, he could stage an act of political theatre against you.
He could.
That, I mean, you gulp as I ask that question.
He could. I mean, I don't want to dismiss it. It's not my goal to provoke the Kremlin, but equally, it is my objective to report honestly and fairly on what's happening in Ukraine, and I'm not going to stop doing that. That's the most important thing.
What does it actually mean in practice, though, for you? I mean, does it now mean that you can't travel to places you could travel to before? Are you changing the way you behave in your daily life here in the UK or around the world? Are you getting extra support and advice on what to look out for, how you use your phone, how you answer the door? How's it affecting your ability to do your job?
Well, Ed, in a way, all of those things. It's not affecting my ability to do my job. I mean, I can continue to report from, on and about Ukraine, and that will not change, and that won't change for me, and as today's front page shows, that won't change for The Sun. In practical terms, I was already banned from Russia, and so this should give you an insight into how Russia treats people who cover the war in Ukraine. I was banned in 2022, in the first summer of the conflict, after we'd been reporting so much for you and for The Sun about things, including Russian war crimes, the indiscriminate use of cluster bombs in civilian areas. So I was put on a sanctions list. I could not travel to Russia. That's been the case for over 2 years. There's no difference there, of course. This court judgment means that were I to travel to Russia, I'd be arrested immediately.
And what would happen to you if you were arrested within Russia?
So the court has authorised pre-trial detention, what we'd call custody, and I could, if convicted, be sentenced to about 5 years in prison. I mean, under the Russian penal code, I'm guilty. I did cross into Russia without their permission. I don't quite know what they expected me to do. The skies were saturated with drones. Did they want me to stop the military convoy and take my passport out and try and get it stamped in the embers of their border post? It didn't exist. There was no other way of doing it. So the only thing that Russia could want for me to have done is not to have gone to Kursk and not to have reported about this extraordinary development in the war. I mean, worth remembering that this was Russia's worst defeat on home soil, worst loss of home soil since the end of the Second World War. Ukraine launched this surprise and stunning lightning offensive, and for us to go, and we were the first British reporters to report from occupied Russia since William Howard Russell did it in Crimea in the 1850s.
And are you changing your behaviour in London?
I'm not changing my behaviour in London, no.
You aren't being more careful, taking precaution, thinking about your phone?
I've asked the right people the right questions, and if those people tell me that I need to be more careful, then I'll be more careful. But as of now, it's my understanding that, were Russia to try and target a British journalist in the United Kingdom, that would be, despite the feral activities of their intelligence services, that would be a really significant escalation.
Your front page this morning in your paper, this British teenager killed by a Russian drone. Now, this is a young man, James Wilton, only 18. He's the youngest UK victim of the invasion. think he was 17 when he went out to Ukraine. Didn't have any combat experience. What can you tell us about James Wilton, Jerome?
It's an utterly sort of heartbreaking story. This incredibly brave and ideologically driven young man has put his life on the line. You know, he's given his life defending Ukraine. He was, as you say, it was his first combat mission. He was crossing territory to try and resupply frontline troops with his unit. They appear to have been caught by a swarm of Russian drones, one of which we think dropped a grenade or some sort of munition on him and killed him. His comrades managed to recover his body, but his team leader was later, very seriously wounded, maimed, lost limbs, also in a similar sort of situation. And it's a reminder that, he's certainly not the first Brit, and there are tens of thousands of Ukrainians who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, like James.
We should say that it's actually illegal what he did, isn't it? It's not legal for a British person to go and do that. I don't think the government enforces the law, but he wasn't doing this as part of any sort of British sanctioned thing. It was off his own back, and actually, it is against the law.
My understanding is that the government has been.
The government hasn't enforced the law, but the law is the law.
British soldiers are not allowed to go to Ukraine and there is a direct order for all serving personnel that they cannot go to Ukraine of their own volition to join the Foreign Legion.
Yes, the Foreign Office has warned joining the Ukrainian International Legion is illegal, although it's not clear if this applies to non-combat volunteers. So far, the government has not tried to enforce the law.
Well, James lost his life in a combat situation, didn't he? I mean, it's a terrible story and a tragic story, and you feel terrible for the family and worried. But, I mean, it's also... it's shocking to see a 70-year-old British lad going to do this.
Yeah, and James's dad, Graham, has told your paper, "I'll never get over this. I did not want him to go, but his heart was set on it. He wanted to help Ukraine."
Dear.
Well, Jerome, thank you for your courageous reporting. I mean, as you can see from what's happened, it really does require courage to do what you do, and you've come in here with a message of defiance.
Well, thank you for having me on, and thank you for having the reports on. It's really important that Good Morning Britain viewers get to know about what's happening. It's really important that Sun readers, and I think both of us are showing our determination that we keep doing it.
Do stay safe, but do keep doing your job.
Yeah,
both of those things.